President, I want to set some context to where we are financially at this point. Everyone knows last year and the difficulties of COVID-19 and what happened and the extraordinary measures that were taken to be able to offset the economic damage that was significant. CBO, as of July 21st of this year, estimates the federal deficit for 2021 will be $3 trillion. Much of that based on what was done last year during an emergency time period. It's 13.5% GDP. That deficit in 2021 will be the second largest since the World War II, since 1945. Now this year, in a year that we're finally working our way out of COVID-19, though still taking it seriously, this year, there's $2 trillion in additional spending in March of this year. There's a $1 trillion infrastructure plan that's in front of us now, and a $3.5 trillion tax and spend bill that apparently we start in 2 days. Listen, I've been told over and over again throughout the course of this debate that the infrastructure package would be paid for. And then later I was told, well, mostly paid for. And then CBO came out a couple of days ago and said $250 billion of it is not paid for. $250 billion, according to CBO's estimates. To make matters worse, part of the rest of it that CBO does estimate is still areas where I would look at it and go, that's pretty shaky estimation. For instance, the unused unemployment benefits from earlier this year. That's an area that I look at and I think, okay, if you're taking unemployment benefits that were borrowed with debt money, then not spending them, and then later go back and grabbing them and saying, now we're spending them and they're quote unquote paid for, that would be the equivalent of me taking out a $20,000 car loan, but yet buying only a $15,000 car. So using the extra $5,000 to buy cat food and donuts after that and say it was paid for. It's not paid for. The extra $5,000 would go to debt reduction. In this case, it's $53 billion, not $5,000. That area is total debt spending as well. Though CBO may score it, it's really not there. One of my favorite areas of scoring in this I find fascinating in the course of this conversation. This bill mandates the sale of over 87 million barrels of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Almost the identical amount is assumed to be collected from the sale of 87 million barrels of oil to be able to pay for the electric car charging stations. So literally this bill sells oil to then pay for the electric car charging stations. This bill also delays, to get score for this, delays a Medicare Part D regulation that had already been delayed already. My concern is this: we're not paying attention to the most basic element. This is $250 billion unpaid for, according to CBO, and many other areas of pretty shaky pay-fors in this. My simple suggestion is this: let's do infrastructure, but let's do the infrastructure we can afford. If we can't afford an extra $250 billion of this $1 trillion bill, then let's back it up to $750 billion. That should be pretty straightforward. If we can't pay for that extra amount, we shouldn't do that extra amount. So saying that, Mr. President, in the pending measure, the Senate Amendment 2137 to H.R. 3684 contains a matter within the jurisdiction of the Budget Committee that was not reported or discharged from the Budget Committee. Therefore, I raise a point of order against Division J, Title IX, Section 905 of the amendment pursuant to Section 306 of the Congressional Budget Act of 1974.